Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Hi, good evening. I'm Beth Parker, and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. For this episode, I'd like to give you a little bit of background. The Ethical Perspectives team meets to discuss and select topics. My topic was the nuclear family. So, what is a nuclear family? Well, the answer seems to be culture specific. On one hand, we have Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, who said in late January, people should only become parents if they're sure they will never need help. It's not society's problem to take care of other people's children. On the other hand, there are those who believe it takes a village. All things lifestyle are culture specific, including our definition and our ideas regarding civilization and progress. About that time, a friend of mine and a panelist who you will meet shortly shared a copy of Civilized to Death, subtitled The Price of Progress by Christopher Ryan. Upon reading this book, it occurred to me that it's through our family structure that we define expected values and behaviors and practices that determine the type of culture and society, and that is the civilization that we build. So when our executive producer said to me, well, how does this all come together? It seems that whether it's Ethical Perspectives Committee or our panelists and or the listening audience, we are a collective. We share the same time space, we share the same air, we share the same common thread of current events. We're all in this together, collaborating and creating our society, our culture, and our civilization. Some believe that as our ancestors delivered something sustainable to us, we have the responsibility to deliver something sustainable to those who follow us. So now we can talk about what we should deliver and how we want our civilization to look. Each of our panelists are part of an iconic non-corporate business or businesses that impact the fabric of our civilization. Let's meet our panelists. We had hoped to be joined by Jan Weissmiller, the owner of Prairie Lights. We have technical difficulties, but we're fortunate to be joined by Colton Leclair and by Wesley Shirley. So Wesley, let's start out with you. Say a few words about yourself, and as creator of the Full Bowl, give us some context about sustainable eating practices.
All right, so I got my PhD in sociology at the University of Oregon, and one of my areas of expertise was animals and society. So I was really interested in how animals impact human societies, how human societies impact non-human animals. And so that obviously led to questions about food and food sustainability, because the biggest interaction we have with non-human animals is through our consumption. Yes, we have pets and we love our pets, but the really biggest impact that animals have on us is through our food choices. And so as I kind of worked my way through questions of sustainability, what does it mean to consume animal or animal products? What does it mean socially? What does it mean economically? What does it mean environmentally? What does it mean for us as humans as well? And so that really kind of led to many years of thinking about this and teaching about it. And I started the Full Bowl in 2017. I've been a vegetarian for 26 years, and the Full Bowl was really the first vegetarian restaurant in Cedar Rapids that I'm aware of. And the idea was to create tasty, healthy food that really shunned animal products as much as we could, which is, so everything that we serve is vegan, everything we serve is vegetarian, and everything has a vegan option. And so, and that's been going we're coming up on our 5th year of being open now.
Okay, thank you. Let's meet Colton. Colton, I know I consider you to be a health consultant and well researched on natural healing practices as well. Tell us about this book and why it is so iconic, why it is so important to you, and a little about what it means to you.
Yeah, so I came into understanding about this book several years ago after I was recommended a book called The Human Zoo, which is written by a sociologist and anthropologist named Desmond Morris. Um, After seeing some interviews with that topic in mind, the topics within The Human Zoo, I came across this author, Christopher Ryan, and his newest book at the time, Civilized to Death. So uh, what was so interesting to me and what I think is so valuable about this book, Civilized to Death, The Price of Progress, is how much of a hard look it really uh, gives at our current situation, where we're at with civilization and society today, and equally as important, where we came from. There's a narrative that our ancestors struggled against nature constantly and perpetually in this cycle of just trying to survive. That's kind of the common narrative. However, in Civilized to Death, The Price of Progress, it's asserted that that for 99% of our anatomically accurate human ancestry, we lived much different lives than we do today, and suggests that it was not as difficult or trying as we kind of make it out to be today. So the value that I see in the book and relating to the topic of civilization and how civilized we are, or maybe how uncivilized in some ways we are today, it relates very much to these ideas within the book.
So I will be referring back and forth to this book, and I hope that we can make this kind of a conversation rather than me asking a question. So Wes, back to you. One of the quotes that is mentioned in this book by the author, the same book, most of us don't have a fixed idea of how much we want, and he's talking about how much we want to eat. Instead, we look to outside cues like the size of a package or a cup to instruct us. And the cues, in American society especially, all point toward more. Comments about that, thoughts about that, either Colton or Wes, or both of you?
So yeah, I would say that, I think it's a pretty well known phenomenon about, the sort of size of servings in American society as far as food goes, that people from other cultures will come here and just be amazed at, like how much food is put on a plate. And I think there must, be an intersection of capitalism here, because, capitalism survives by producing and selling. The more it can produce, the more it can sell, the more successful a company is. And so there is a push to, I think, always purchase or consume more. That's just built into the way capitalism works. And, our food systems are not immune from that pressure.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme of people trying to lose weight and trying to get control of what should be a natural process, our eating process. Colton, did you have something you wanted to add, or necessarily?
Yeah, on the topic, I want to mention one thing that comes to mind is maybe some of us haven't come into contact with this, but I think it's the big gulp or the big slurp or something like that. You go to a gas station and they've got these massive sizes of drinks that you can get, whether it's a soda or a sugary lemonade or what have you. Not to contradict Wesley too much, it's really more of an ironic point, but you go from this relatively large size to a larger size. That next larger size is a little more expensive, and then the largest size of all, being the big gulp or the big slurp or whatever it is about, I don't know, it's some significant amount less to pay for than that previous size. So it's almost, in these really strange ways, it's incentivized, it seems like, in our culture to consume more. And it's something that I don't really view as sustainable, and I certainly don't view it as healthy for individuals, in the way of consuming food, that is.
So Wesley, were you going to say something? Did you have
Oh,
something to add?
no, I was just, yeah, it's an interesting point about why, yeah, that in some, in our system of that, the more you get, the more you're supposed to pay. So it's some weird perverse incentive to charge less for more product. But there must be a reason that it's done, because they wouldn't do it unless it was beneficial to that company. And I'm not really quite sure what the economics of that really is, but they do it for a very specific reason, which is they must assume that they're going to make more money by selling larger products. I don't know. It's a very interesting point.
So everything is better, bigger, faster. I'd like to talk about a slightly different point that was made in the book. And if I can set the background, there was a documentary filmmaker who was living with a tribe in Papua New Guinea. And a few of the tribesmen had suggested visiting the filmmaker in the United Kingdom. And so they arranged that. And I'm just going to read a quote from the book. With every whispered observation, the tribe members, left us powerless to explain the madness of our own social norms. And when they boarded the plane back to Papua New Guinea, we were the ones racked with envy, envious of their joyously independent community, their clear understanding of what mattered in life. And to be more specific, the book goes on to say, well, they were confused about the lifestyle. No wonder they were confused that Mark, the father of the family they were staying with, left early every morning and didn't return until evening. Why are you doing that? Hughes recalls them asking. Hughes, again, is the filmmaker. Why are you going out every day, not seeing the people that you really care about? It doesn't make any sense at all. Mark explained that he had to work to pay for the house they were living in. How long will you be doing this to pay for your house? They asked. When Mark told them about his 25-year mortgage, they looked at him with astonished pity, explaining that when one of them needed a house, they got together with the other men of the village and built a house in a couple of weeks. Comments? Once again, we're yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to comment on that. It's apparently observed by some of these anthropologists, Christopher Ryan and Desmond Morris included, I believe, that many of our hunter-gatherer ancestors actually spent relatively small amounts of time doing the things they needed for their necessities, spending roughly 20 hours a week. It's estimated with a lot of cultures to obtain the food that they needed, to create the shelters that they needed, all of these things. So if in fact that is the case, then it is it's a drastic difference to what we experience today, of course. And many will argue that we have certain conveniences and other commodities which we take advantage of in our 40-hour work weeks, or some of us sometimes even more than 40 hours. But these commodities and these other things that we obtain by sacrificing so much of our lives, I wonder the ultimate value of them in the end. When we spend our adolescent years, our childhood years in school, Monday through Friday, very, very similar to an adult work week, at least in America, kind of being tailored to this lifestyle, primed for it, and then entering into a full-time job to be able to put a roof over your head. It's pretty much required to work 40 hours to be able to afford, in most sectors of business or economy anyways, someone has to usually put in at least 40 hours a week. So we work this way for most of our lives in America, up to about 60 years old or so, in most cases. And at that point, after having some weekends off and a couple weeks of vacation every year, if you have a decent job that allows that, then you retire with a few years left to enjoy what other free time you have. So it's a huge contrast to what, again, 99% of our historic time as anatomically modern humans, it's very different from what they experienced. And I think that kind of plays into how we've become maybe less civilized. We're living a life that is so much different than what we have really grown accustomed to as a species.
So that kind of segues into a question that I had. If we are so civilized, how have we managed in a few hundred years to be a part of the destruction of an ecosystem? And this point came from the book that our ancestors maintained for hundreds of thousands of years. Comments or thoughts about that?
I think it's a complex story that our species has woven for itself. With the advent of agriculture, it would seem we exploded the population on this planet, from a couple million to almost 8 billion now, in 2022. So with that came advances in technology. Those things definitely play a role in affecting the world in adverse ways, and also beneficial ways that are used to help people. But there's this ideological decoupling of ourselves from nature that has also come about, it seems, and also that need to constantly grow, in the West, or in the kind of global capitalistic economy. For that to work, it always has to grow. It has to grow exponentially, and I think that because of that, we continue to grow, we continue to pollute, we continue to waste, and all of these things contribute to that rapid decline towards ecological disaster, economic disaster, social disaster, and social unrest that we experience on a fairly frequent basis, it seems.
Yeah, thank you. Wesley, anything to add, or should we move on?
So I think the advent of agriculture definitely altered our relationship to our natural processes and the natural world. So rather than living in synchronicity with the natural world, we became ones who were trying to tame it. That we were trying to sort of wrangle nature into fitting our own needs as individuals and as societies. And so the advent of agriculture 10,000 to 11,000 years ago, and then the Industrial Revolution sort of put all of that on hyperspeed, so that we were able to produce at a much higher rate than we'd ever been able to produce. And if you're going to produce, then you need raw materials. And those raw materials almost always come from nature. So thinking about trees or precious metals, thinking about fish in the oceans, that ultimately for capitalism to succeed, as Colton was saying, that it has to grow and it has to grow. And in order to grow, it needs more and more inputs. And those inputs have to come from someplace. And those inputs are often come from the natural world. And so we found ourselves in a place where we have competing needs or competing interests. So one is growing the economy, and one is trying to maintain a world that is still livable and inhabitable by the vast majority of people on the planet. And so we've really reached a point where those two interests, or those two competing forces, have really, kind of collided at this point. And so this is kind of where we find ourselves, trying to find a way forward to keep the earth inhabitable, while also doing the thing of making sure the economy grows, which is, the opposite of what we need, often the opposite of what we need to do to ensure that we live in an habitable world.
So I'd like you to both think about how we start to fix it in our closing comments. But, another example, another manifestation of the discord involves not only the political adversity and the dysfunction in the government, but also the normalized episodes of, for example, gun violence and even road rage. How civil are we when we treat each other in the manner that we do?
Yeah, I mean, just the production of weapons of mass destruction that has been going on, especially for about the last century, that we've really put ourselves in a position where we can do more harm to ourselves and our fellow humans and the earth than we, in the last 100 years than we did in the, entire history of humanity previous to that. And so it is a question of what does community look like? How do we go about creating a sense of shared space or shared history, rather than seeing it as a competition, seeing it as communal or shared, that we're all in this together, that we cannot, this is the one world we have, and these are the communities that we have, and how do we go about creating those communities that are sustainable? And as far as answers, I mean, there are, hundreds and hundreds of different, issues that need to be tackled at any given time. And it's just community activism, I feel like, is the only thing that we really have to push back against these forces.
Sorry. So Wesley, what are some hints or tips or ideas you would have for people who want to look at a sustainable way of eating? Drink more water. I mean, what comes to your mind?
Well, so I mean, the most obvious one, and has been obvious for a while, even though it doesn't necessarily work its way into all the dialogue, is we really have to decrease our reliance on animal products. That animal agriculture is one of the biggest contributors to global warming, as far as the release of CO2 and methane and other greenhouse gases.
Can we do that? You look pretty healthy, Wes.
Yeah,
so there must be a way to do that without.
I mean, there have been entire cultures who have been vegetarian, who eschew meat and other animal products. So this is, it's not rocket science. It's not some great secret. So learning how to eat healthy, but also, often also, sort of leads into eating not just healthy for the individual, but healthy for the environment, healthy for society. That we know a lot of chronic diseases, so heart disease, high blood pressure, that a lot of these are related to, the mass consumption of animal products like meat and cheese and dairy. And so, it happens on an individual level, it happens on a societal level, and it happens on a global level.
Colton, I know that you, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I would echo pretty much everything that Wes said there. There's a lot to be said for reduction of consumption in animal products, the amount of land use and water use required to produce these things is just staggering when compared to like a plant alternative. So I would echo all those things that Wes said. I would also just mention that at this point, with how populous the world is, how little space there is, how thin we're stretching all of these resources that are truly valuable to us, like water, clean drinking water, fresh water, land, air that we breathe, the things that we all need. It becomes very difficult. And also in that population, I would mention that it's difficult when we're becoming fragmented into these different in groups, to use a term that these anthropologists use, in groups and out groups, in groups like a political party or maybe a certain religion. And we have trouble as a species collectively now, all sharing the earth in this globalized, connected way. We have trouble forming coherent group identities that serve all of us, that we can all um, act upon and act on behalf of.
So according to Colton, we need to form coherent community. According to Wes, we need to come hang out at the Full Bowl. I was recently talking to, well, actually it was quite a while ago. Two different things. As I was gathering information for this episode, I was asking people, well, what kinds of things can we do to bring this all together? Things came up like, be patient, stand down and let the other guy go first. Let me see, what were some of the other things? Can't find my list right now, but basically take more time, stand in the other person's shoes, those kinds of things, practical things that we can do to reach out and to build community and to understand where other people are coming from. And I remember, this is the other part of it, I remember a long time ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about happiness, and I said, yeah, I think I'm relatively happy. And she said, well, you're not as happy as if you'd be Michael Jordan's wife. And the thought had never occurred to me. I thought I was happy. So I'm saying that kind of facetiously because we are happy and we do have a lot of things to be grateful for. In the final 30 seconds or so, how would you like our audience to, what would you like for them to take away from this conversation? Colton and Wesley.
I would hope that we can walk away from this discussion with a willingness to wonder about the value and the cost of civilization that we are accustomed to as we know it. I would hope that we can also walk away with a willingness to try and improve the quality of lives of every person and every other being that we share the planet with. And I would ask that we open our minds to that, even if it means looking back to learn how to do that.
Thank you. Wesley, got probably 15 seconds.
It's collective action that none of us can change the world as individuals, that we can only change it as part of a larger collective that sets out to change the way we do things and the way we interact with the world.
Thank you for joining us, panelists, and thank you to our executive producers and to KCRG for helping us create this episode of Ethical Perspectives on the News.